You know, in the telling trade, credit should be given where credit is due, they say. Now, blame, same, I say. But I'll let you decide on your own which to bestow upon the avant-garde playwright of my Montrose, Geraldine Pfister, who was the impetus of this effort. She was looking for new material, you see, so she came right down to my guild meet, and she sat right down by my good seat. Then she peered right down at my gross feet and barked right out, "Damn those dogs!" Now let me tell you, this brazen bit of familiarity felt a bit indecorous to me, she having not offered me first a friendly salutation. So I growled, "Yes, Dame Pfister. They are long, wide, and flat on the bottom. They're bent, bowed, and buckled by bunions. Coarse, calloused, plus itching and stinking. But what else would I use under legs for my walking? What about these dogs?" Again, she looked down and said, "I think you keep a dog at home?" So then I puffed up and said, "Well, your opinion, madam, is in the minority. Everyone else says my darling Sarah Draper is an incomparable beauty." Next, with pointing, she said, "I suspect a history of chewing going on down there." Vexed, rejoined her, and I said, "I simply refuse to elaborate on any unproven crime of my past. But I assure you, ma'am, that these days these arthritic legs are too stove-up stiff to ever again take these toes to my teeth for their nightly nail nibbling." Well, that shut her up. The silence I sought ensued, there being no repair to or repartee. Well, I went home and started on an essay on the underlying theme, and soon befell some bizarre business so closely related that I mounted the two together into this diptych of oral art I call assessments and assumptions. And now for you, I'll tell the remainder, just how I do today remember. It's not new, I need you to know, that a number of naughty know-nothings have announced their negative notions near this nice neighbor when I navigate the gnarly nuances of the narrow, not new sidewalks of my Montrose, when I'm wearing my old comfortable shoes, since so unseemly they seem to some to seem. But I'll surely show you I shan't be shamed by the shape of my shoes now. I do not apologize for loyalty to my lower leather. No, once I'm introduced to shoes whose company I enjoy, we're not easily parted, no matter how worn out I feel. Goodness gracious, to get me to give up galoshes would take the guile and the grit of the gods of the Greeks. And oh, what a ripe reality we'd reap these days if an obsolete celestial were to mess up a new model mortal. But indeed, what a mighty match it might make, pitting its powers against my principles. The trouble is that people make assessments, assumptions even based on our appearance, though that rarely serves the larger truth. Now, we all do it. I'm not immune. In fact, I argue that our Darwinian processes rely on it. For what would our species look like if, before risking our rigorously rehearsed rites and rituals of randy reproduction, we hadn't made assessments and assumptions of someone's dandy mutations? Seen any mutations you like out there recently? Well, keep looking. But note now, assessments and assumptions can stifle the open mind, creating stagnant habits of thought. So please, folks, Be careful when you're making your assessments and assumptions because some people accumulate mysteries not solved by readily available clues. For instance, the people walking freely in my Montrose today with locked-in narrow ideas, who think it inconceivable, find it incongruous to their sense of possibilities when they hear rumors from the old-timers that at one time, long ago, though, glance at my accoutrement of late may speak otherwise, I once was indeed a dog dresser. I had a rack of handsome suits, drawers of beautiful sweaters, but the pride of my closet was my vast collection of fine footwear. I simply had some of the best shoes made in America or in England. Back when shoes were actually made, handmade in America and England. Not all sweatshops sewn in Singapore or robot built in Bangalore. I had Aldens. I had Cole Haans. I had Ellen Edmonds. I was slumming when I stepped out in my Johnson and Murphys. I had Churches, Clarks. No one in Montrose had a better representation of fine quality, classic design, gentleman's shoes than I. Now, all that was decades ago. And truly it pains me so to recall it, but the tragic reason for my general fastidious habitude was, frankly, I suffered from a terrible affliction that runs in my family. Now, not the narcissism. Something far more confining that once contracted, most people must take to the grave. And an early grave it does bring. I had a few spells as a child, but it wasn't until the year I left school that I came down with a full-blown case of employment. Fortunately, that didn't last long, and my religious regard for my raiment eroded, leaving nothing but an ardent love of old, comfortable shoes. Now, the storytelling masters I've been studying would probably say this self-centered, too-true story is overdue for punching up with a juicy conflict. But my being a social slacker and a consummate keep-to-myselfer, I don't experience a lot of personal conflicts. But I will bristle to the core if accosted by any self-serious, so-called authority figure. So for Act 2, I'm going to relate a recent run-in I had with one. I rode my bicycle the other day along those beautiful bayou trails just north of my Montrose. I rode so fast and so hard I got thirsty, and so I cruised over to the skateboard park for its amenities. I wheeled right through the outside gate, slipped right by the sign-in window, rolled right up to the water fountain, bent right down and took a sip. Out of the corner of my eye, I could see I was being studied by the guard they commissioned after 9/11 to protect the skaters from terrorists, or vice versa if you've seen our skaters. And my being a magnet for the constabulary, he made a beeline for me. I just kept my head down at the fountain, hiding behind a stream of water till he walked right up and I was looking down at his feet. I thought he was going to start some small talk about me not signing in. Or maybe about me riding past that little sign on the gate, that 4 by 5 foot little sign that reads, "No bikes!" Exclamation point. So I looked up at his 6'4", 280-pound frame, hands on his hips, frowning down at me. And I could just tell he was making assessments and assumptions. Now, y'all don't know me all that well, but the introduction to this here dissertation was the indication that conversations are my jeopardations. But since my immediate future hung in the balance over what happened next, it seemed prudent that proceedings should start with my greetings. But what sputtered through my lips was this possibly displeasing, "And what's your problem?" and a sinking feeling fell over me right as I said it. Well, so surprisingly, somewhy, that centrist softened somewhat. He dropped his hands from his hips and raised one to his chin to stroke as he looked me over head to toe, mostly toe, while fine-tuning his assessments and assumptions. Well, like a proper copper, following a visual investigation comes the verbal interrogation. "Sir," he whined. "Yes," I whimpered. Good cop, bad cop, I couldn't tell, so I braced myself for serious business that was bound to follow. He took an authoritative breath, looked me square in the eyes, and asked, "What size shoe do you wear?" Now, let me tell you, this brazen bit of familiarity felt a bit indecorous to me, he having not offered me first his formal introduction. But I was cordial this time. 12 wide, I said, when Lady Luck leads to their location. Ecstatically, he stated, "Well, that's my size too." Then astoundingly, he added, "And I've got a newish pair here in the office today I'm just going to let you have." Well, all of a sudden my sinking feeling was eclipsed by his surreal folly. He had mistaken me for homeless. Not the first time that happened, I admit, but seldom does my seamed suffering set up such a sudden subsidy from the soft-touch citizenry. So I looked down at my shoes. So sad they seemed. Big toes sticking out of a hole. Foam poking through the padded tongue. Knots in several places up and down the laces, and I felt a pebble poking through the flimsy, flapping sole. Conflicted and confused, I pondered my position. But just then, a loud rumbling fell from a cloud above, followed by close by a clap of lightning. Apparently, the champion of this charity was Zeus himself, channeled through the guard. And I didn't relish a run-in with the ranking Olympian. So I said, "Oh, what a ripe reality I'd reap this day if my obsolete sneakers were to bow down to some new-bought brogans. And oh, what a mighty match it might make, putting new foot gear onto my feet here." And as the guard went into the little shack to get the shoes, I hollered out at him, "You know, rare is the occasion that people from my realm encounter people from yours so thoughtful and so generous. And I hope you will always be just as thoughtful and generous to me as you are here today, because I'll need to look you up in the future, right here, in, let's say, a decade's time, just as soon as these good shoes I already have on finally wear out." And empty-handed, I jumped on my bike and rode home as fast as I could, still wearing those old comfortable shoes that so much do I love, that bold neighbors and friends still make their fun of.